It starts with fire, not a cigarette, not a modern habit, not a product from a store, just fire. Long before cities, long before writing, and long before human beings understood chemistry, our ancestors already lived beside flames every single day. Fire gave them heat. Fire cooked their food. Fire kept wild animals away. Fire gave light in the darkness. But fire also created smoke, and smoke was dangerous. It filled the lungs. It burned the eyes. It made people cough. Yet somehow, that same smoke became one of the oldest human discoveries ever made. Because at some point in history, an ancient human looked at smoke and asked a question that would change everything. What if this does something? What if smoke is not just a byproduct of fire? What if it is a tool? What if it is medicine? What if it is sacred? What if it can change the mind? That question is where the strange truth of ancient smoking begins, the first encounter with smoke. Imagine the world thousands of years ago. No roads, no electricity, no phones, no houses with roofs, no modern comfort, only forests, caves, grasslands, and open skies. A group of ancient humans sits around a fire at night. One person throws dry leaves into the flames. The fire crackles. Smoke rises. Few people move back because the smoke stings their faces, but one of them stays close. He notices something unusual. The scent is different. The smoke from this plant feels stronger than normal wood smoke. It has a sharp smell. It fills the air in a strange way. It seems to change the feeling of the whole space. That may have been the beginning. Not a planned invention, not a scientific experiment, just curiosity. And curiosity is one of the most powerful forces in human history. Because once humans noticed that some plants change the smoke, they began testing more. They did not have laboratories. They had fire. They had memory. They had trial and error. If one plant helped the body or calmed the mind, they remembered it. If another plant made them sick, they avoided it. If smoke helped during rituals, they repeated it. Slowly, smoke became knowledge. Smoke became meaning. For ancient people, smoke was never just smoke. It had many meanings. It could mean cleansing. It could mean prayer. It could mean healing. It could mean warning. It could mean connection to the spirit world. In many cultures, smoke was seen as something that could carry messages upward. The fire stayed on the ground. The smoke rose into the sky. That made smoke feel like a bridge between worlds. So people began using it in rituals. They burned herbs. They burned resins. They burned sacred plants. They used smoke during ceremonies. Sometimes it was for protection. Sometimes it was for blessing. Sometimes it was for entering a trance. Sometimes it was for speaking to ancestors or gods. This is one reason ancient smoking became so powerful. It was not just about the body, it was about belief. And when belief and sensation meet, traditions become strong. Ancient smoking was not modern smoking. It is important to understand this clearly. Ancient smoking was not the same as modern cigarette smoking. Modern smoking is tied to industry, addiction, branding, and global trade. Ancient smoking was different. It was usually tied to ritual, healing, ceremony, and survival. People were not smoking because of advertisements. They were not smoking because a company told them to. They were not smoking for fashion in the modern sense. They were using smoke because they believed it had value, and in many cases, they were right in a practical sense. Some smoke repelled insects. Some smoke preserved food. Some smoke calmed the nerves. Some smoke may have affected pain or breathing. Some smoke helped create a sacred atmosphere. So the ancient idea of smoking was much broader than the modern one. It was a part of life, not just a habit. The role of plants. Ancient people did not burn random things by accident forever. They learned which plants mattered. Different plants gave different effects. Some were aromatic, some were bitter, some were calming, some were stimulating. Some had strong spiritual meaning. Across the world, people experimented with plant smoke. In some places, tobacco became important later. In other places, herbs and resins were more common. In some traditions, incense played a major major role. In others, smoke was tied to shamanic healing. This is why the history of smoking is not the history of one plant. It is the history of many plants and many cultures. Each region added its own version. Each society developed its own smoke tradition, and each tradition carried meaning. Smoke and the mind. One of the biggest reasons smoke became important is because it can affect how people feel. Anyone who has sat too close to a fire knows smoke can be uncomfortable, but in certain doses or through certain plants, smoke can also create unusual sensations. It can relax the body, it can shift attention, it can make the world feel different, it can create a trance-like state. Ancient people may not have explained this in scientific language, but they could feel it, and that feeling mattered, because human beings have always sought altered states. We seek dreams, we seek music, we seek dance, we seek fasting, we seek ritual, we seek mystery. Smoke became one of the oldest ways to step outside ordinary awareness. That is why it survived across time. It touched the body and the imagination together. Smoke in healing. Ancient smoking was not always about spirituality. Sometimes it was about health. Many early societies believed smoke could clean the air, drive away sickness, or help the body recover. Herbs were burned to reduce pain. Certain fumes were inhaled for breathing problems. Smoke was used to calm nerves or treat discomfort. Some plants were used because people believed they helped the lungs or head. Today, modern medicine would separate fact from belief much more carefully, but ancient people worked with what they observed. If smoke seemed to help, they used it. If a certain herb created relief, they kept using it. Over time, this built a body of traditional knowledge. That knowledge was passed from elder to child, healer to apprentice, tribe to tribe. It became cultural memory, smoke as protection. Smoke also had a practical side. It helped protect people in ways that were easy to notice. It could keep insects away. It could preserve meat and fish. It could dry hides. It could help control pests around camps. It could make enclosed spaces less attractive to animals and bugs. So while smoke had spiritual power, it also had everyday utility. This is important because many ancient practices survived not only because they were sacred, but because they worked. People trusted what helped them survive, and smoke helped in more ways than one. When did smoking actually begin? This is the tricky part. There is no single exact moment where we can say, this is the first human to smoke. History does not work that neatly, but evidence suggests that humans were using plant smoke and tobacco-like materials thousands of years ago. Archaeological clues show burned plant remains, pipes, residue, and ritual tools from ancient cultures. Some evidence points to tobacco use far earlier than many people assume. Other evidence shows smoke was part of ceremonies involving herbs and resins long before tobacco became global. So the answer is not one date. The answer is a long timeline. Ancient smoking developed gradually. It began with fire. It grew through experimentation. It spread through tradition. It became ritual. It became medicine. It became culture. The ancient world loved ritual smoke. If you look across ancient civilizations, smoke shows up again and again. It appears in temples. It appears in healing practices. It appears in burial rituals. It appears in purification ceremonies. It appears in sacred offerings. Why? Because smoke feels symbolic. It rises. It disappears. It transforms. That makes it perfect for ritual. People saw smoke as something that could carry prayers, blessings, or intentions upward. In a world where many things felt uncertain, smoke gave shape to invisible belief. It made the unseen feel real. It made spirituality visible. That is a powerful thing. A global human pattern. One of the most fascinating parts of this story is that smoke traditions appeared in many parts of the world. Different cultures, different climates, different plants, different beliefs. Yet the same human pattern appeared again and again. People burned materials. People inhaled smoke. People used smoke for ceremony. People linked smoke with healing and spirit. That tells us something important about human nature. It tells us smoke was not a random habit. It was a universal idea, a tool, a symbol, a bridge. In that sense, ancient smoking is one of the great shared human behaviors. Tobacco's later arrival. Eventually, tobacco became the most famous smoking plant in world history. But tobacco did not invent smoking. It joined a much older human tradition. Once tobacco spread, everything changed. It moved through trade. It moved through empires. It moved through social customs. It moved through addiction. It moved through commerce. What had once been local and ceremonial became global and industrial. That is the big historical shift. Ancient smoking was usually tied to tradition. Modern smoking became tied to business, and that changed the world. Why the topic feels so strange? This subject feels strange because it mixes opposites: fire and breath, danger and comfort, medicine and risk, ritual and habit, curiosity and addiction. That tension is why the story works so well in a video. It is not just about smoke, it is about human behavior. Why do people try strange things? Why do we repeat what feels powerful? Why do we turn accidents into traditions? The history of smoking is really the history of human curiosity, the ancient human mind. At the center of this story is the ancient human mind. Our ancestors were not simple creatures who only hunted and survived. They observed, they experimented, they remembered, they believed. They created meaning from experience. A fire was not just heat. A plant was not just a plant. Smoke was not just smoke. Everything could become symbolic. Everything could be useful. Everything could be sacred. That is why ancient people mattered so much to the future. They were not just surviving. They were building culture, the strange truth. So what is the strange truth about ancient smoking? It is this: humans did not begin smoking because someone invented it one day. They began smoking because fire, plants, and curiosity met in the same moment. They discovered that smoke could change the body. They discovered that smoke could change the mind. They discovered that smoke could change ritual. They discovered that smoke could change society. And once that happened, smoke never left human history. It moved from caves to temples, from rituals to trade, from healing to habit, from ancient tradition to modern controversy. That is why this subject is so powerful. It is old. It is mysterious. It is deeply human. Ending. When you sit near a fire tonight, think about that first ancient moment. A leaf falls into the flame. Smoke rises. Someone inhales. Someone notices. Someone remembers. And from that small moment, a very long human story begins. A story of fire. A story of smoke. A story of belief. A story of experimentation. A story of the strange things humans do when curiosity meets the unknown. That is the strange truth about ancient smoking.